Welcome. Today we're undertaking a really focused exploration into a story that, well, it haunted the city of Philadelphia for over 6 decades.
Mm,
For generations, the focus was on this chilling, unsolved homicide, a mystery known simply as the case of America's unknown child.
that's right.
The materials we've synthesized for you trace a harrowing journey, starting with a grim discovery spanning this incredibly long period of cold case frustration and then culminating in a true triumph of modern forensic science.
And this specific investigation, which stretched over 65 years, it's arguably one of Philadelphia's oldest and certainly its most notorious cold cases.
Absolutely.
It really serves as a monumental example of investigative determination. I mean, the body was discovered way back in 1957.
1957.
And for decades, the victim was known only by that grim moniker, the boy in the box. The sheer longevity of the uncertainty and the sustained public and police effort, it just speaks volumes about the profound, haunting impact this child had on the city, even without a name.
So, our mission today is clear. We are going to synthesize all of the extensive materials covering this timeline. For you, the listener, we need to understand not just the tragic immediate events of the discovery, but precisely how a child could remain unidentified for so long in the modern era. And then, crucially, we'll dissect the specific, high-tech investigative steps, particularly the intricate use of genetic genealogy that finally broke the case open and led to his identity. Joseph Augustus Zarelli.
Yeah.
This is an exploration of forensic patience and a persistent hope that really changed the landscape of cold case investigation.
It's just a compelling narrative because it demonstrates that the police work of 1957, though it was massive and desperate, it failed because of the tools. They just simply weren't available then.
The tools didn't exist.
They didn't. Then we see the investigation pause, then stall, and then it finally gets cracked, not by a confession or some lucky break,
Yeah.
but by the surgical precision of 21st century DNA analysis.
Mhm.
We'll examine the specific clues, both compelling and contradictory, that derailed those early efforts,
Mhm.
and then contrast them with the final precise steps that solved this initial, very painful mystery.
Okay, let's ground ourselves in the original tragedy. The reports confirm the discovery occurred on February 25th, 1957,
Right.
and the setting was a heavily wooded area off Susquehanna Road in the Fox Chase neighborhood of Philadelphia. This area at the time was semi-rural, a place where someone could believe they were safely, abandoning evidence of a terrible crime.
And the initial circumstances of discovery are truly bizarre. It all starts with a significant and a chilling delay in reporting.
A
A
delay.
huge one. We know the body was actually first found by a young man who was checking his rabbit traps in those woods.
Okay.
What's so unsettling is that he did not report the finding. He was afraid that if he involved the police, they would automatically confiscate his traps.
This is traps.
Yes, a meager piece of property, perhaps,
Yes.
but when he valued enough to let a possible homicide go unreported.
Wow. That fear, that prioritization of property over public duty, it led to several more critical days passing before the authorities were finally called.
Exactly. And the body was then spotted by a second person, a college student. He apparently stopped his car after noticing a rabbit running into the underbrush, and he knew there were traps in the area, so he suspected the animal might be caught.
And he was the one who finally made the call.
Well, he was the one who investigated, discovered the body, but even he was initially reluctant to contact the police himself.
Really?
Yes, the account state he only reported what he found the following day, and the motivation for that was tragic in itself.
What was it?
He had heard news reports about the disappearance of another child, a little girl named Mary Jane Barker.
Ah, okay.
Now, the boy in the box was never connected to the Barker case, but that news item, it seems, provided the final push for the student to overcome his reluctance and finally call the authorities. So the official investigation didn't even begin until February 26, 1957.
And when investigators arrived, the scene was, well, it was instantly horrifying and deeply confusing. They found a male child, estimated to be about 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He was found nude, wrapped tightly in a plaid blanket, and placed inside a discarded cardboard box.
And that box,
Like it.
that became one of the case's most enduring, though, as we'll see, ultimately misleading physical identifiers.
Misleading how?
It was a common storage carton, but it had once contained a bassinet, specifically one sold by J.C. Penney. So this clue indicated where the box might have originated, a household that had recently purchased infant supplies.
Yeah,
But it only led investigators so far.
right.
It confirmed they were looking for a family, but which one? That remained the question.
And when we look at the condition of the child, the materials paint just a devastating picture.
It's heartbreaking.
The reports clearly detail severe signs of abuse and neglect. The child was severely malnourished, and his body had suffered extensive physical attacks, evidenced by multiple bruises covering his entire body. Authorities determined immediately that the cause of death was homicide, specifically by blunt force trauma.
The devastating image of this 4-year-old boy, nude, beaten, starved, it's awful to contemplate. The evidence suggests sustained immense suffering in his final days. His torso and legs showed distinct signs of severe bruising, which confirmed repeated physical assault.
So this wasn't a quick, single act of violence?
No, this is a pattern of abuse.
But here's where the case truly becomes puzzling. This is where you get the conflicting clues that immediately complicated the investigation and sent detectives down dead ends for decades.
Yes.
Despite the overwhelming signs of violence and severe malnourishment, the child appeared to have been recently and carefully groomed.
This contradiction is so central to the mystery of the boy in the box.
Yeah.
Why the apparent care after such brutality? He had a recent haircut, but it was described as having been poorly done, almost amateurish.
Amateurish.
And possibly even performed post-death, because clumps of hair still clung to the body and the blanket. His fingernails were also neatly trimmed.
That suggests such a strange psychological dichotomy. It introduces an element of careful staging or, for lack of a better term, an attempt at cleanliness or preparation surrounding an act of profound violence and neglect.
It's as if the perpetrator, having committed the abuse, then tried to erase the signs of the life they destroyed by cleaning him up.
It's almost unimaginable.
Absolutely. And it opens up two very dark possibilities. Either the abuse and the grooming were performed by the same person, showing a deeply fractured state of mind, or someone else entirely was involved in the disposal, someone who tried to afford the victim some final, small dignity. That conflicting presentation was a major hurdle for early investigators trying to build any kind of profile.
And adding to the identification difficulty, he had several distinctive scars that, they should have helped, but they didn't.
Right. Specifically, the records note an L-shaped scar under his chin and surgical scars located on his ankle and in his groin area.
Surgical scars.
In 1957, surgical scars, especially those suggesting significant medical intervention like the groin scar, might imply a hernia repair or something similar. That should have been a clear path toward medical records and an identity.
But wasn't.
No. And we have to remember the context here. In the mid-20th century, medical records weren't digitized. They certainly weren't centralized. Hospitals were isolated silos of information.
So even with those prominent physical identifiers, if the child was taken from a remote part of the country, or if the parents never brought him back for follow-up care, those records would have been nearly impossible to locate through traditional police channels.
It underscores the completeness of the concealment, not just the body, but the entire history of the child. And the fact that he was already suffering from prior medical issues just compounds the sadness.
Yeah, it really does.
The initial police optimism just faded so quickly, precisely because all the traditional methods failed. They had the fingerprints, they had the physical clues, they had the scars.
They thought it would be quick.
They did. When the police received the report on February 26th, they took the boy's prints, expecting a match within days against military dependents or local records. But no one came forward. And the physical evidence, rather than providing answers, only deepened the mystery.
That initial failure really set the stage for 6 decades of frustration, and the initial scramble to identify the victim was massive. It demonstrates just how quickly the tragedy seized the public imagination in Philadelphia and the Delaware Valley.
Oh, the scale of the early effort reflects the technological limitations of 1957 perfectly. This wasn't a case solved by computer databases. This was shoe leather work and mass media appeal.
Right.
The Philadelphia Inquirer printed an astounding 400,000 flyers depicting the boy's likeness.
400,000.
Just think about that today. That's saturation marketing for a missing child. They were sent out, posted all across the area, and critically, they were included with every single gas bill in the city of Philadelphia.
So everyone saw it.
It was a citywide, relentless plea for help.
And the physical search was equally intense, which signals how high priority this case was from day one. The reports mention that 270 police academy recruits systematically combed the crime scene repeatedly, covering every inch of that wooded area.
And they did find potential clues, but as is so often the case in cold cases, these clues ultimately led to frustrating dead ends. They found a man's blue corduroy cap, a child's scarf, and a man's white handkerchief with the letter G embroidered in the corner.
Edgy.
Edgy. But none of these items ever established a viable link to the victim or the perpetrator. They were just objects left behind in the woods, tantalizing, but in the end, useless.
We also see the extraordinary lengths the police went to create a recognizable image. They released a post-mortem photograph of the boy, but they dressed him and seated him, trying to show how he may have looked in life. They were hoping to jog a memory that the grim scene photo just couldn't. It was a direct appeal to emotional memory.
And over the following decades, this case became an obsession for several key figures, most notably a man named Remington Bristow.
Bristow.
He was an employee of the medical examiner's office who essentially acted as an independent investigator. He pursued the case relentlessly until his death in 1993, demonstrating the kind of personal dedication you often see in these historical cold cases.
Yeah.
And the records detail specific, high-profile theories that consumed years of police time, showing that tenacity, even if the leads were eventually, discredited.
Okay, so let's delve into the first and arguably most compelling of these theories, the foster home theory. This started around 1960 and was heavily driven by Bristow.
This is where the story gets really interesting and a little unconventional. Bristow was actually guided to this location by a psychic operating out of New Jersey.
A psychic?
Yes, a psychic, which led him to a foster home situated about 1.5 miles away from where the body was found in Fox Chase. Now, while a psychic lead seems tenuous, Bristow followed it up and found physical evidence that gave the theory significant weight.
What was the physical evidence he found there that linked back to the boy in the box?
He attended an estate sale at the foster home and made 2 remarkable circumstantial finds. First, he discovered a bassinet that was strikingly similar to the one the J.C. Penney box had originally contained.
Same type of bassinet.
Exactly. And second, and maybe even more compellingly, he found blankets hanging on a clothesline that matched the distinct plaid pattern of the blanket wrapped around the victim's body.
Wow.
The combination of the box and the blanket was incredibly persuasive to Bristow.
So the theory constructed around this circumstantial evidence must have been taken very seriously by the police. What exactly did Bristow believe happened?
Bristow speculated that the child was the son of the stepdaughter of the man who ran the foster home. The timeline suggested the child was born out of wedlock, and the body was disposed of to cover up the perceived shame of the stepdaughter being an unwed mother in the 1950s.
But there was a problem with it.
A big one. When police thoroughly investigated this, they established that all registered fostered children at that home were accounted for.
And was that the end of it? Or did it linger?
Oh, it lingered for decades. Precisely because the physical evidence, the bassinet and the blanket, was so compelling. The key re-examination didn't happen until 1998, when a new police team, including Philadelphia Police Lieutenant Tom Augustine and, significantly, members of the VDOC Society, took a fresh look.
Let's just pause quickly to define that group for the listener. When we talk about the VDOC Society, who are they and why were they so critical in this review?
The VDOC Society is a fascinating, high-profile group of retired and active law enforcement experts. We're talking former FBI profilers, forensic scientists, seasoned homicide detectives who volunteer their skills to review cold cases, often for free.
Okay.
And they operate under strict anonymity. Their involvement in 1998 confirmed the original police findings. Despite the physical items found at the estate sale, the family running the foster home was likely not involved. That detailed professional review finally closed what had been the most compelling lead for nearly 40 years.
That must have been incredibly frustrating for the investigators who had dedicated so much time to it. To have such a compelling, nearly perfect narrative, supported by key objects like the bassinet box, only to have it officially dissolve under modern scrutiny.
Absolutely.
So moving into the 21st century, the next major dead end was the Martha or M allegation in 2002.
This was a significantly darker, though equally unproven theory that came out of the shadows years later. A woman identified only as Martha, or M, came forward, accusing her mother and father of acquiring and killing the child.
Okay.
Her story was deeply disturbing. She claimed her parents purchased a boy named Jonathan, whom she asserted was the boy in the box in the summer of 1954, beat him to death, and then abandoned the body in the Fox Chase area in a box.
The police considered her story plausible enough to investigate, particularly given that the details of abuse matched the medical examiner's report. But there was a massive caveat regarding the reliability of the source, wasn't there?
A huge one. The documents note that investigators were deeply troubled by her testimony because she had a documented history of severe mental illness.
I see.
Furthermore, they were never able to verify the story independently. Neighbors who had access to Martha's house during that time period vehemently denied that a young boy had ever lived there, dismissing her claims as, quote, ridiculous.
So without corroboration, this theory, too, was just another dead end that couldn't lead to an identification or an arrest.
Exactly. It truly shows the difficulty police face when confronted with compelling but unverified testimony in a high-profile case.
And beyond these dramatic accusations, there were other unconventional attempts to generate leads, particularly by forensic artists trying to refine the boy's appearance.
Yes, the theory put forward by forensic artist Frank Bender in 2008 is a perfect example of trying to find an answer in plain sight. Bender's theory focused specifically on the hurried, unprofessional nature of the haircut and the appearance that the boy's eyebrows may have been styled. He speculated that the victim may have been raised as a girl, or at least have been made to look like one. He thought maybe that would explain why missing children reports for boys didn't match him.
That is a remarkable, almost chilling example of investigators using every available detail, even the quality of a haircut, to generate new leads.
And to show their determination, Bender actually released a sketch of the unidentified child with longer hair, reflecting the loose strands found on the body. He was urging people to think outside the traditional image of a short-haired boy.
And then there was another lead, I think, from Memphis.
Yeah, that was the Memphis lead. Around the mid-2010s, between 2013 and 2017, a theory developed by some writers from California and New Jersey suggested a connection to a family in Tennessee.
And the authorities took the suggestion seriously enough to investigate.
They did. Local authorities investigated the circumstances, and eventually DNA was taken from a family member in Memphis. Homicide Sergeant Bob Kuhlmeyer confirmed in 2017 that the DNA comparison showed absolutely no connection to the victim found in Fox Chase.
So yet another lead that promised resolution but just delivered more frustration.
Right. For over 60 years, the tenacity was there, but the right path wasn't. The key finally shifted when advances in DNA forensics made the impossible possible.
And the initial steps toward this turning point started relatively early, in 1998, which was at the same time as the reevaluation of the foster home theory.
The first major DNA effort occurred in 1998 when the body was exhumed for the express purpose of extracting a DNA sample, specifically mitochondrial DNA, from a tooth.
Mitochondrial DNA?
Yes, it's inherited only from the mother, so it's less useful for building complex family trees, but it was a technological leap for the time.
And what was the purpose of that sample if genealogical methods weren't fully developed yet?
It was primarily for direct comparison against close family members who might have come forward or against existing missing person databases. They essentially had the signature of the maternal line just waiting for a match.
Oh.
Then, years later, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released a modern forensic facial reconstruction in March 2016, trying, yet again, to put an updated face to the mystery. But the ultimate turning point, the scientific step necessary for the full genealogical work to follow, came with the second exhumation.
And that second exhumation took place in 2019, specifically to retrieve additional and higher quality DNA samples. Why was that second sample necessary if they already had DNA from 1998?
That's a really important question. The methods and technology for extracting and analyzing nuclear DNA, that's the DNA from both parents, had advanced exponentially between 1998 and 2019. The 1998 sample was degraded and limited.
So they needed a better sample.
They needed a pristine, high-quality sample to perform what's called investigative genetic genealogy, or IgG. This requires extensive data to build those massive family trees necessary to find distant cousins.
And they got it.
They successfully retrieved nuclear DNA, finally setting the stage for the powerful new technique that had transformed cold case solving all across the country.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is the critical insight of this entire exploration. This is where the story shifts entirely, moving from decades of investigative frustration to a rapid, science-driven success story. The use of genetic testing and investigative genetic genealogy proved to be the crucial step after traditional police work had stalled.
It really did.
But to understand why this worked, we need to know how IgG differs from standard police DNA work.
Right, that is the core of the breakthrough. Standard police DNA databases, like CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, they're very restrictive. They only contain DNA profiles from convicted felons, arrestees, or unidentified human remains. So if the perpetrator, or in this case the victim's family, was never arrested and didn't voluntarily submit a DNA sample for law enforcement, CODIS is useless.
So the boy in the box wasn't in CODIS, and his relatives were in CODIS. How did the investigators jump that massive barrier?
They used public databases designed for ancestry hobbyists, specifically a site called GED Match. It's a public data repository where people who test their DNA through companies like Ancestry or 23andMe can voluntarily upload their raw genetic data to find more distant relatives. This pool contains hundreds of thousands of profiles uploaded by regular citizens just looking into their family history.
And it's this massive voluntary public data set that law enforcement, with careful legal navigation, can now use.
Precisely.
Which means the investigation advanced because an unsuspecting, unidentified cousin of the victim uploaded their DNA for fun or curiosity, right?
Exactly. That cousin provided the first critical match, perhaps a third or fourth cousin, giving investigators the first branch on this massive 60-year-old family tree.
Wow.
From there, investigators used traditional genealogical research, birth records, obituaries, census data combined with the genetic clues to trace that line closer to the boy in the box.
So it wasn't just the DNA.
No, it was a combination. They then encouraged specific individuals identified through this process, like that original cousin's mother, who was identified as a first cousin of the boy in the box, to submit her genetic profile specifically to GED to confirm the close relationship.
So it was a precise, meticulous chain reaction. One person's ancestry curiosity provided the initial path, which was then narrowed down by a more direct relative providing confirmation. Once they identified the likely immediate family line through this forensic genealogy, what was the final legal step needed to confirm the name beyond a shadow of a doubt?
The identification had to be legally confirmed. They had a genetic connection to a family. They had traced the paper trail backward using public records, but they needed an official document. So investigators sought and obtained a court order for the child's birth certificate.
And that was it.
That birth certificate finally revealed the child's full name, as well as the names of his biological parents. This identity was then subsequently verified by the nuclear DNA evidence they had already gathered.
It's astonishing how long the name was known to the investigative team before the public reveal. The genealogical investigation itself uncovered the name in October 2021.
A full year.
That must have been an incredibly emotional year for the investigative team, knowing the name of America's unknown child but needing to build the criminal case before releasing it publicly.
It was a year of intense focus. The investigators had the name, Joseph Augustus Zarelli, but they had to use that name to start the homicide investigation, locating living witnesses and compiling historical context before they could release the identity.
And the public announcement finally came 65 years after the discovery.
Mm-hmm.
On November 30th, 2022, the Philadelphia Police Department announced that they had finally determined the boy's identity. Then, on December 8th, 2022, 65 years, 9 months, and 13 days after his discovery, he was publicly identified as Joseph Augustus Zarelli, born on January 13th, 1953.
And this identification opened up entirely new, complex avenues for the ongoing homicide investigation.
So what new information did law enforcement share about Joseph's specific family background?
They identified both biological parents. Joseph's father was Augustus John Zarelli, known as Gus, and his mother was Mary Elizabeth Plunkett, whose maiden name was Abel, known as Betsy.
Okay.
What's fascinating here, and directly impacts why he remained unknown, is the complexity of their relationship.
And what was that complexity?
The couple was not married, and the public reporting suggests they were never known to have been in a long-term public relationship with each other.
So they weren't together?
No. Both went on to marry other people sometime after Joseph's birth and birth certificate filing. This suggests Joseph's existence was likely hidden or at least kept very quiet within the immediate family structure.
Which explains why no one filed a missing person report for him.
Exactly. He was effectively invisible to the broader community.
That idea of invisibility is just crucial. Did the police or subsequent reporting provide any context about why Joseph may have been neglected or placed in the circumstances that led to his death?
There are definite clues pointing toward a history of non-custodial care, or maybe adoption. The Philadelphia Inquirer reported that Joseph's mother, Mary Elizabeth Plunkett, had previously placed a baby girl up for adoption.
Okay.
And this fact led one of her cousins to speculate in an interview that Joseph might not have been raised by his biological mother and could have also been given over for adoption or maybe informally placed in the care of relatives or acquaintances.
This is speculation based on family history, of course.
Of course, but it provides a critical context for why a child might simply vanish without an official record being flagged anywhere.
If he was informally placed with someone else, maybe a distant relative or an acquaintance, that might explain the conflicting clues found on his body, the mix of severe abuse and that bizarre, hasty grooming.
Exactly. The grooming could have been an attempt by the person who had custody, or perhaps the person who abused him, to clean up the evidence. Or, if Joseph had been with an intermediary family, the abuse may have occurred right after he was transferred back to a chaotic or violent household just before his death. The identification of the family unit provides the who, allowing investigators to now look for the where and why of the homicide itself.
And crucially, law enforcement established where Joseph lived before his death, giving them a physical starting point for the investigation. Where exactly did they confirm he had been living?
At the December 2022 press conference, law enforcement stated that Joseph had lived in the area of 61st and Market Streets, or possibly 64th and Callowhill.
That's a tight geographic focus in West Philadelphia, which is far from the Fox Chase Woods where he was found.
Very far. This geographic jump suggests the body was moved by vehicle to an area intended for concealment.
And once they had this address, the investigation shifted entirely. It went from searching a vast unknown world for a name to focusing sharply on a specific neighborhood and household for answers about the crime itself. What was the direct appeal Captain Jason Smith made to the public with this new, localized information?
The captain emphasized that Joseph lived past the age of 4 years old. Therefore, someone must have seen him.
Someone had to have.
The appeal was specifically targeted at neighbors, other family members who hadn't stepped forward, or anyone who might remember seeing the child and recalling whatever was occurring at that particular household over 6 decades ago.
So the identification didn't solve the murder, but it transformed the case into an active, localized investigation based on historical memory.
Precisely. The scope changed dramatically. However, the reports also clarify the difficulty. Both of Joseph's biological parents are now deceased.
Which means investigators can't seek answers directly from the two people most likely to know the truth.
Right. But the focus is now on others who might have witnessed Joseph's final years.
Sure.
Absolutely. The key fact is that Joseph does have living half-siblings from both parents' subsequent marriages. These individuals, along with the neighbors who lived in the 61st and Market or 64th and Callowhill areas, are now the primary focus for any potential evidence that might still exist.
They're looking for anything.
Anecdotal evidence, old photographs, or long dormant memories. The police are very clear. This is an active homicide investigation, and public assistance is absolutely vital, even 65 years later.
It's a powerful illustration of forensic genealogy, essentially turning a half-century-old cold case into a contemporary, actionable investigation.
It really is.
The process required immense resources and commitment, but it delivered the most important piece of information that was missing for generations: the child's identity.
And we have to emphasize the patience required for the science. Getting the nuclear DNA sample in 2019 was only the first step. Then came the laborious process of uploading the profile to GD Match, finding distant matches, tracing those matches back through paper records to build the family tree, identifying the parents, and then obtaining the legal order to confirm the birth certificate. Each step was meticulous and patient, demonstrating a modern scientific tenacity that rivals the passion of Bristow back in the 1960s.
This story, while it's rooted in profound tragedy, is ultimately a testament to human dedication and the enduring power of memory and community. I do want to revisit the long-standing dedication the Philadelphia community had to Joseph's memory, even when he was just a nameless victim.
The treatment of this child's burial reflects the public's enduring sympathy. Joseph Augustus Zarelli was originally interred in a potter's field.
Could you just clarify what a potter's field is and what that signified for him?
A potter's field is a public burial ground for the indigent, the unclaimed, or the unknown. It is the cheapest, most anonymous form of burial a person can receive.
So it symbolized the total lack of dignity and identity afforded to him at the time of his death.
Exactly. However, in 1998, when the first DNA exhumation occurred, a significant community effort ensured he was reburied at Ivy Hill Cemetery in the Cedarbrook section of Philadelphia.
And this reburial was truly a community-driven initiative, demonstrating the depth of feeling in the city.
It was entirely donation-driven. Ivy Hill Cemetery donated a large plot of land. The coffin, the headstone, the funeral service, they were all donated by the son of the very man who had buried the boy back in 1957.
Incredible.
The public attendance and media coverage at that 1998 reburial were significant, showing the emotional weight this case carried. And to this day, city residents still maintain the grave, keeping it decorated with flowers and toys.
For years, the large headstone simply read, America's Unknown Child, with a plaque underneath reading, Heavenly Father, bless this unknown boy. It was a memorial to a symbol, not a person.
And that historical record was finally corrected. On what would have been Joseph's 70th birthday, January 13, 2023, a new memorial containing his full name and image was unveiled, and his name was formally added to the existing headstone. After 65 years of anonymity, he was finally afforded the dignity of being recognized as Joseph Augustus Zarelli.
So we end this discussion not with the closure of an arrest, but with the profound closure of identification and the open possibility of justice. The search for the perpetrator now rests entirely on local memory and historical context.
And that is the final thought we must leave with you, the listener. Given that Joseph Augustus Zarelli was confirmed to have lived for 4 years in a specific confined geographic area near 61st and Market Streets or 64th and Callow Hill, what new evidence might still exist?
Yeah.
A faded photograph kept in a drawer, a hidden piece of documentation about his custody, or perhaps a long-dormant memory held by a neighbor who remembers the child and who remembers whatever was occurring at that particular household over 6 decades ago. The identification was the most crucial step, but the final chapter of justice for Joseph Augustus Zarelli still needs to be written by the community.
A compelling, heartbreaking, and ultimately hopeful story of enduring investigative work that finally brought a child home. Thanks for listening.